I had just gone through a pretty rough divorce a few months ago. For the brief 2 years my ex and I were married, most of our nights ended up turning into shouty matches and insults. We were always so loud that we had gotten several noise complaints and an eventual ultimatum that we could be thrown out of the building. Anyway, we ended the whole thing, and she got the most of everything. The house belonged to her family, along with almost everything in it. She let me only have my clothes, some photos, and my dog, Riley. I was short on money at the time. Luckily, a friend of mine let me stay in his home for as long as I needed. While there, I was looking for a better paying job to help me get my life back on track. My search led me to an opening for a campus security guard at the local community college. I arrived at the interview to learn that this was a job for the night shift. I wasn't too sure about taking the job at first, but my bills and growing debts weren't going to pay off themselves. Needless to say, I started the next night. The campus itself was a decent size, both in terms of area and the number of students. The core campus includes 14 educational and auxiliary buildings. The security office was by the south entrance of the college, situated on the second floor of the parking garage. The two senior security guards, James and Darnell, walked me through my job description. My task every night was to complete 2 full searches around campus, checking all the buildings and monitoring the security cameras. My shift would start at 9:30 at night and go through 6 o'clock in the morning, by which time I would take the bus home. The job itself wasn't too bad. I kind of developed a friendship between James and Darnell, since there was a brief period of time that our shifts would overlap. By the time they both left, it would be midnight for me and I would be alone on campus. It's so surreal how such a place that's bustling and full of students can quickly empty out and turn silent. When my shift starts, there's usually a few cars left in the lot for those who took evening classes. Some instructors and other staff would sometimes work extra late, but those instances were rare. In short, my interaction with other people besides my coworkers was almost non-existent. Sometimes on break or in between circuits, if I stayed quiet on campus, I would read a book or listen to spooky stories on my phone. After listening, I would start to feel a little creeped out for being in a campus all alone after dark, but I got used to it. It killed the boredom until I started my next circuit. I wouldn't find much of anything out of the ordinary, aside from the random object left behind by a student, which I would bring back to the lost and found. I just had to make sure that no one else was hanging around after closing. After coming back, I would check the security footage in case I had missed something. There were a few screens recording specific spots with the most activity during the day. One for each parking lot, one for each floor in all the buildings, and one for the administrative office. I got decent pay every couple of weeks. After a while, I moved out of my friend's house and got a small apartment, and I was saving up for a used car. I felt like my luck was starting to turn around finally. And then, I had the scariest experience of my life. I was left alone around midnight like always. The campus was absolutely deserted at this time like normal. It was summer during this time, so the night was pretty warm. I felt like I was building a bit of a sweat in my security uniform while doing my first circuit. I came back to the security office after finding nothing of note and checked the camera feed. I found nothing in any of the screens until I checked the one for the south parking lot near the office. While the screen was small, I could discern the moving of a large shadow across one of the lampposts. It was doing nothing but moving back and forth across the light. The shadow looked too large to be some small bird or animal. I deduced it had to be someone parked off screen so I could invisibly see them. I went out there to check things out and I found nothing. If they were a person just messing around, they would have left a sign of their presence. But there was nothing left behind. I didn't hear a car driving off, or any noise for that matter. I scoped the rest of the south lot to find the source of the shadow. Still nothing. I sighed in annoyance at the thought of some idiot deciding to waste my time. Nothing else happened for the rest of the night. I got used to sleeping during the day, but all I could afford to sleep on was a cheap couch that was anything but comfortable. It was rare that I got a full 8 hours of sleep on it, and to top it off, the AC unit had crapped out. My cheap apartment had gotten warmer, making it much harder to sleep. I got to the couch at the start of my shift with maybe 4 or 5.5 hours of sleep. I had coffee, but the energy it gave me only lasted for so long. With it being extremely late, my office feeling cool and being quiet everywhere, I started feeling drowsy. Sleeping on the job wasn't allowed, of course, but every now and then I let myself have a brief nap to refresh myself. So, I set my head on my desk and I fell asleep instantly. I was later jolted awake. A feeling of something very wrong switched my tired mind on alert and woke me up. I rubbed my eyes and checked the monitors to see if anything was up. I looked at the camera feed for the south lot, and my eyes narrowed. Beneath one of the lamplights, a person was standing, not doing anything but just being very still. I couldn't make out any details, but this person had long black hair and looked very tall for almost reaching the light. I looked at the bottom of the screen and found the camera was still recording. Whoever the camera was showing was still there. The feeling that jolted me awake intensified, and I was aware of myself shaking. A chill, colder than the air inside the office, crept up my neck. My body was reacting to some sort of danger the image was giving off. Still, a weird person on the security footage was not an excuse to not do my job. I got to the lot in under a minute and saw that person still standing under the lamplight, just being dead still. Their back was facing toward me, and their head seemed to be bowed forward. As I approached closer and tried to get their attention, I found that this trespasser was very tall and lanky, and was wearing a dirty white dress. I called to her again, asking if she needed help, but didn't respond. She just kept standing like a statue where she was. I reached out to touch her, and my hand retracted back from the burning sensation her skin gave off, as if she were on fire. I cursed and shook my hand to cool it off, and the lady moved for the first time. Her head lifted upward, as if finally acknowledging I was there. She turned around, and I started to track backwards. Her body was humanoid, but she had the head of a goat or a ram. The fur was pitch black, contrasting against her pale skin and white dress. The eyes were red like burning embers, and strands of flesh hung off its curved horns. As I backwards walked and sped up, I could hear it give off a deep, thunderous roar. I ran back towards the office, and I swear that I could hear the thing sprinting after me. I ran faster than I ever have in my life, and I barricaded myself in the security office. For good measure, I switched off the lights inside and called 911. I told them that something was on campus and they sent someone over. I hung up and strained my ears to hear any noise outside of my office. It was hard to notice anything other than the pounding of my heart working overtime. It felt like an eternity before I heard the knocking at the door. The cops notified their presence, and I slowly opened the door. They questioned me about what I had called for. When I told them, they looked at me as if I were a mental patient or something. I played the footage back to them, and there the thing was. At the very least, they weren't going to arrest me for making a fake emergency call. But with the trespasser gone, there wasn't much that they could do. They left, and I was once again all alone. By now, I was very afraid. Not that I was alone, but afraid that I wasn't alone, and that that thing was still out there. I wasn't going to take any chances. I waited in that office and kept the door locked until the end of my shift. I left a note saying that I resigned immediately, and I never went back. When I was 4 years old, my parents moved to a rural small town in the West Virginian outback. This was because Charleston was too noisy and too expensive for them. They wanted the quiet and privacy of the wooded town. I'm not going to say the name of the town on here, so you don't go there and bother the people who live there. Our new house was a 2-story house with 4 bedrooms. 2 of the bedrooms were going to be converted into an office and a playroom. My parents both worked at home, so an office space for them was going to be very useful, and the playroom was for me to have all my toys and not bother to clean them up when I was done. I loved our house. There was nothing wrong with the house, and in fact, it was the only place where I felt safe in that town. I started going to school at the normal age, and there weren't many other people, so making friends was easy. And by the time that I was in 6th grade, I was friends with pretty much everybody at school. I started to dislike the town around the age of 12. Anytime that I would walk to the bus stop in the morning, something always felt off. Sometimes the air was unnaturally still, despite the lack of an approaching storm. Sometimes the usual bird songs wouldn't be present. Nothing ever felt quite right. I would usually wake up for school at around 6 a.m., just so that I could take a shower, and then play on my DS before I had to go to school. My bus would arrive at around 8:15, so I liked that extra time to myself. One day, however, I lost track of time and realized that I had missed the bus, and school started at 9, so no big deal. It wouldn't take me all too long to walk there. It was only about a mile away. When I left the house that day, I once again felt the unease that I usually would whenever waiting for the bus in the morning. I brushed it off and began to walk. I distinctively remember it being silent and still that day. Although the town was tiny, you would usually see people driving at the time in the morning, but the roads were empty. Not even any other kids walking to school. The walk felt like it took an eternity. I felt like something had been watching me that day, even when I was in school. I decided to sit away from the windows that day. But that didn't help me shake the feeling though. After school, when I was waiting outside for my bus to arrive, I knew that something was watching me, that it wasn't just a feeling anymore. It's like my mind was screaming at me to run, that whatever it was getting closer. And just then I saw it. As one of the buses passed, I saw something that definitely wasn't human on the bus. Its skin was pitch black, it had white dots as eyes, and it watched me through the back window as the bus drove off. I was paralyzed with fear. I was snapped back into reality when my bus driver hollered at me to get on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I could only think about what I saw on the bus. In the morning, I decided to tell my parents that I felt sick and I didn't want to go to school. They gave me a look like they knew that I was lying, but they let me stay home anyway since I had all A's. All day, all I could think about was that thing. However, I didn't see it again until a few years later. It was late December, and the last day of school before the Christmas break, and in all my classes, we just watched movies. I sat near a window and I looked out at the falling snow, and I saw it. About 10 feet away from the window, staring at me. All of a sudden, I remembered what I had seen a couple of years ago. I don't know how long I stared, but after what seemed like an eternity, it turned and walked away in the snow. I got a better look at it this time. Its arms were nearly to the ground, and its legs were always bent. It had a very noticeable slouch, and it was, I guess, 7 to 8 feet tall. I was terrified when I got home that day. My mind raced with questions. What was it? And why was it following me? When I walked through the doors that day, my mom immediately hugged me and made sure that I was okay. I was extremely confused, and when I asked what was going on, they showed me what was being talked about on the local news. A 13-year-old kid had just been found dead on a small road in the town. He had been mauled by something. Although they didn't show any pictures for obvious reasons, police were saying that it was most likely a bear attack. When I heard this, my stomach sank. I immediately jumped to the thought that it was whatever had been watching me that day. My mom must have seen my pale face because she reassured me that everything was fine and that the police would deal with it properly. I wanted to believe her, but I just couldn't. How were the police going to catch that monster? And if I even went so far as to tell the police what I saw, would they believe me? I went up to my room and turned on Cartoon Network to try and calm myself down, but it didn't work. I eventually panicked myself to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night and Adult Swim was playing American Dad reruns. I decided to get some water from the kitchen. As I descended the stairs, I looked out the back porch window at the bottom of the stairs. And right there, staring into the window, was the monster. I instinctively ducked back up the stairs and peeked out to see if it had noticed me. It didn't seem like it did, because it was scanning back and forth as if looking for me. My dad had a gun in his room, so being the stupid kid I was, I thought the best idea was to shoot it with said gun. I snuck into my parents' room and found the hiding spot for the pistol. I made sure that it was loaded, which it was, and I crept back down the stairs. I peeked out towards the back door again, and it was gone. I slowly made my way into the kitchen, and I hid under the table, looking through all the windows to see if I could see it. Just then, I heard the front door open. I saw it slowly shamble as the door swung open. It walked around. I assumed it was looking for me. It walked up the stairs and I heard my parents' door opening. My hands trembling as I slowly got out from under the table. I made my way over to the stairs. My parents' door was wide open. I saw the black against the dark blue in there, and I knew that was it. I pointed the gun up the stairs and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened because the safety was on. All that I accomplished was that it had noticed me. I saw it turn towards me, the white dots piercing into me. I fumbled with the gun, trying to turn the safety off. When I got it off, I looked back up and the door was closed. It took me an eternity to work up the courage to go up the stairs and open the door. And when I did, it was gone. I nearly collapsed when I saw what it had done to my parents. I'll spare the details here because they still haunt me to this day. In short, it looked a lot like a bear attack, so if you want a good idea of what their corpse is like, just Google it. I was only 16 at the time and I had no job. I didn't want to be put in foster care and then become homeless, but I had no other choice than to call the police. When they arrived, they asked me questions because they found me clutching a gun in my parents' room. They ruled me out as a suspect, and like I guessed, they sent me to the foster care system. Luckily, I was adopted by people who only wanted older kids so they could give them a nice home. That was only 4 years ago, so the memories are still fresh in my head. I live in South Carolina now because my new family wanted to move me away from the place that was giving so many bad memories. I can't ever thank them enough for taking me in. Since that day, I haven't seen the thing since. I hope that by this point, someone was able to kill it. If not, well, we all know the answer to that.